Hey, welcome back. We spend so much time talking about college football, but you guys know where my passion lies. Love the grid, but it's the hoops, baby. College basketball is here, and no better person to talk to than the Basketball Hall of Fame writer, the Sporting News. You see him on Big Ten Networks. We'll talk about that in a minute. Also, of course, Fox. Mike DeCourcy joins us once again. Mike, great to see you. And you know what? Happy days once again for you and I.
It's always great when basketball season comes around. It feels like the rest of the year is just preparation for November through April. I think that's how life runs, isn't it?
For you and me, absolutely. Okay, yeah, football's nice, but we're 45 days away from or whatever the case ball. And I think we're going to see the same in basketball here with the conference expansions. Obviously, the Big Ten has grown, SEC, AC, Big 12. As we tip things off here, what sticks out to you as being maybe different or unique from seasons past?
I think obviously the change in conferences that has made it so that teams that you'd never see on the floor anymore. When I was covering Pitt back in the early 90s, and a lot of the time that I when I started at Sporting News, back then CBS used to love to make these intersectional matchups on Saturdays and Sundays. They didn't play quite as many conference games on television, but they would set up. And in that particular year, when I was doing the Panthers, they sent them to UCLA, which wasn't bad in January, I will tell you. I enjoyed my trip to LA. My wife came out. We had a good time that weekend. The Panthers did not have such a good time getting drilled by Don McLean and company. But those kinds of things happened all the time 30 years ago, but they don't happen, or they didn't happen in the last 10 or 20 years. And now we're seeing those games now, and now it's a league game. Texas will play Florida. USC will play Rutgers. Those games will happen, and they will be league games. We've seen it reflected in the football season, and I think it's made college football better by a lot. The 12-team playoff is the principal agent of the improvement of the college football season. But I think the fact that Oregon played Ohio State in front of a sellout crowd and a Saturday night television audience was better for college football than it not happening. And so I think we'll see the same. I think when UCLA plays Purdue, I think that's going to be really cool. And I'm looking forward to it, and certainly looking forward to being a part of that conversation on BTN.
Yeah, no question about that. I want to talk about BTN in terms of we were discussing here in the break that there's a bit of a change in schedule. We usually watch you on Sunday nights, but now we're going to see you on Saturdays on Big Ten Network, right? Tell us
Yeah,
about.
yeah, starting December 7th, I'll be in not all Saturdays, but nearly all from December until we get to the end of the regular season. Looking forward to that. We have a heavy schedule of games every Saturday, whether it's on BTN or on the other networks. We have certainly a steady diet of great games on BTN on those Saturdays, and then we'll have our wrap up, the big show, every night. And this big show is bigger than it used to be. We've got 18 teams in the Big Ten, and that certainly makes a difference. Sunday night, I will not any longer be in on a regular basis on Sundays. The show we did for 13 years, Big Ten basketball and beyond, is no more. But one of the executives at the network said to me that in making that decision, that basically we are beyond now as a league. It's so vast and lots of games to get to, and the growing importance of the women's game in our shows has also taken up time that we might have devoted to conversing about the men's game. And I think that's obviously the right move with what Caitlin Clark did a year ago and the audience she built for women's basketball. It demanded more time, and rightfully. When this year with Juju out at SC and UCLA having a terrific team and Ohio State, et cetera, it's Maryland had a big win earlier in the month in women's basketball. So we're going to have a great women's basketball season on BTN as well, and we're going to cover all that on the big show and our various other programs.
Yeah, and I love that you guys do that. And you're right. To me, it is permeated. You're right. The regular sports audience is no longer a niche audience. Caitlin made it sexy for everyone to get on board. I remember last spring, my wife calling her sister at halftime of the NCAA championship game, and I said, "I'm like, okay, what era are we? We're all big sports fans, but that's never happened. All the games we've watched over the years, and we've been married 30 years, you've never done that before. So it was really cool. I want to get a quick thought from you. I've been on the other side as a host of these kinds of shows, and I know what you bring. What's the big thrill for you when you do that show? I didn't realize it had been 13 years already when you step into the studio and do those shows each week.
First of all, being considered in a conversation uh, with John Beeline and Jim Jackson and Stephen Bardo and Sean Morris over the years, and so many others, and now Rafael Davis, who's been my partner for so long, being able to converse with them and have them respect my opinion and my insight has been the greatest honor. I think about it all the time, and I think I give so much of the credit to Jim, who's a great friend. And walking in when we first did Beyond in 2011, excuse me, when we first did that season, and walking in on a show with me and him and Dave Revson, and Jim could have said, "Why is this guy talking to me? I scored 15,000 points in the NBA and I was a first team All-American. This guy scored 20 points one time in the Point Park Intramural League. What is he?" And Jim was never like that. He always respected my opinion, and I am forever indebted to him for that. And to me, that's the biggest thrill. But it's also, I work and have worked remote. When the pandemic hit and everybody started to work remote, I should have written a book because I've done it for 30 years now. And so I could have written the book on how to do it. And so being able to be up in the Chicago offices and be part of a team on the ground. I have great teammates at the Sporting News. They're wonderful, but I don't get to see them every day. Up there every weekend, I get a chance to interact with terrific people like Rob Mickle, who was our producer on Beyond, so many others. It getting the chance to do that has been an absolute thrill every week.
Yeah, it is. You talk about names like you, Mike DeCourcy, Jim Jackson, Dave Revson, three of the classiest guys. And certainly, I remember that show went on. Didn't realize it'd been that long ago. I'm like, oh, this is a good show. These are three good guys, and you guys have certainly have done that. I want to talk about this year's what we're seeing right now. Some teams at the top in the preseason: Purdue, UCLA. Indiana, Illinois, Michigan State. What have you seen so far? I know it's early. Purdue, the big win, state win last week in West Lafayette over Alabama. We were talking before the Illinois Alabama game this week, but already the Big Ten putting its foot down and making a mark.
I will say, Larry, that I was surprised that in general the preseason rankings elsewhere took such a dim view of the Big Ten. I thought that it would be a really deep, really strong league, and I thought that Purdue was going to be terrific from the jump. Now, they've now exceeded my expectations, even playing at home. Having lost their freshman center, Jacobson, I thought that was going to be a tough blow for them to overcome, and especially so quickly. And I think in the end, it will certainly impact the way this season plays out. But for them to go ahead and take care of Alabama, which came into the season as my number one team and the number one team of Kevin Sweeney from SI and some others, I thought that was a tremendous win. We saw Wisconsin on that same night take care, just completely dismantle Arizona, which a lot of people are predicting to win the Big 12 or to contend for the Big 12, I should say. Certainly Kansas is most people's pick to win it. I think the Big Ten has, it's a very small sample size, but I think they've overachieved or superseded expectations to this point in the season. I think the league should be very excited about that, should be very happy about the wins they've gotten. Iowa got a nice win over Washington State on a semi-neutral floor. So they've only had a couple of games that they lost that would be disappointing. Maybe the UCLA loss to New Mexico was disappointing. I don't think it was necessarily disappointing for Maryland to lose to Marquette because I had Marquette as a top 20 team in the preseason, and Maryland made that a really tough night for the Golden Eagles. Overall, I think it's been a great start for the Big Ten, and certainly a better start than they got off to last year when they ended up having a really strong season and put a team into the national championship game.
Is it harder now than it has been in past years to come up with the preseason top 25? Everybody changing because literally that team, yeah, coach is good. Yeah, I'll put them together. I mean,
Oh, it's not far from that, man.
yeah,
It's really hard because what you don't know, and one of the things that I've said, Larry, is people think that, and I think we started this conversation when we started to have one and dones. People think that the teams that return all their players don't change. And that's just not reality. I've been around this for 40 years. Even if you bring back, if you have 8 rotation players and you bring back every single one, your team still changes because everybody has a little bit different perspective now. Maybe I'm thinking about the NBA and maybe think I need 3 or 4 more shots a game to impress the scouts or whatever it might be. The teams always change, but now they completely overhaul. And having to look at Alabama, I know that they've got some tremendous players who were there last year because I saw them play in the Final Four. But they also lost a lot of pieces from that team. But then they replaced them with significant talent. And you just have to do the mental calculation. And one of the final ones, as you said, Larry, like if I didn't think Nate Oates could coach at all, I would never have picked him number one. If I didn't think he was really good as a technician, I would never have picked him number one. I think he is good enough to win a national championship. So I did. But those are the calculations that you make. Whereas before you could look at a team that had 4 returning starters and Roy Williams on the bench, say, and you could reasonably assume that even if they weren't going to do the exact same things that the previous team did, they could approximate them. Or maybe even they added another McDonald's All-American and they could supersede them. You never know, but it is really difficult now. One of the reasons I say that teams change from year to year, even if they get all their guys back. Michigan State a year ago brought back nearly everyone from their rotation from the team that lost to K-State in overtime in the Sweet 16. They looked they had Tom Izzo on the bench and they had everybody back and you thought they're going to be great. And then they get an injury to their best big guy and then some guys don't really perform like they're supposed to and they wind up struggling just to get into the show. That shows you how even then it was different. And so things always have changed, but they change so much more now that it does make that preseason prognosticating a real challenge.
I know that obviously in the bluegrass, everyone's excited about Kentucky knocking off Duke, and they were going out. So I said, listen, it's November. I said Kentucky completely had to start from scratch. Mark Pope and a completely new roster. And I said, look, for a half, they looked lost for the first half. They looked a little like they weren't quite just they were a little disjointed, and Duke was the better team. But I said, credit Mark Pope and making some adjustments at halftime, and they came back, played strong, and down the stretch did what Kentucky teams haven't done against Duke, and that is actually eke out a win at the end. Let's just call it what it is. But I think that's what makes it so much fun. We talked about Illinois. We were talking here in the break about what Brad Underwood has done with Ty Rodgers redshirting, only one player returning. And so 5 new players, 2 starters from Europe. He's got the 5-star kid Riley coming in from Canada. And that's one that they're growing. We're going to see again, to your point, playing some strong non-conference games there against some, really good teams, Alabama, Arkansas, later on Tennessee, to see what they're to get ready. They've had a taste now of what it's like to get the second weekend, which I think you have to do. You can't just, it's not enough just get to the tournament. You got to get into the second weekend and be a contender. They've now done that. And so I'm anxious to see how Brad Underwood changes his strategies now that he's gotten that far and has a taste of that and wants to take it even further.
I think one of the things, Larry, that I look at when I look at this roster is that they have significant talent. And they had very good players a year ago. And Terrence Shannon has turned into a great college player. It took him 5 years to become a great college player. And this is different. It's not going to take Will Riley 5 years to become a great college player. He may very well be one this year. So he may have walked into the door. It's still early to say because they haven't played great competition yet, but he may have walked into the door as a great college player. And one of the things that I like to tell people, and I was surprised, I talked before about Alabama as a preseason #1 pick. I was surprised so many people picked Kansas because the history of the national champion is so well established. It's like we've now gone 37 years since we had a team that didn't have at least one first round pick in its rotation if they were going to win the national championship. Can you get to the Final Four without that? Happens all the time. Can you get to the championship game without that? Happens fairly infrequently, but it has happened. But when it hasn't happened since 1987. I look at Kansas, I'm like, okay, give me that guy. Maybe Flory Badunga, maybe we'll see about that, but I don't think that's enough for me to say, yeah, that's a national champion. I thought Alabama had that, and that's why I picked them. But Illinois has that. Now, whether there's enough around those two guys, Will Riley, who we talked about before, and Yakashonis, those two guys are both first round talents. So I'm not saying that this team is going to the Final Four or going to win it, but I'm saying that when you have those kinds of players, that door's open to you. And Illinois was a bad draw away from making the Final Four last year. Any other region but Purdue or UConn, they're going. They would have beaten NC State, no doubt in my mind. They would have beaten Alabama, would have been hard, but they would have done it because they were better than Alabama. But they weren't better than UConn, and they weren't better than Purdue. So it was a little bit of a bad draw that kept them from being there. But they weren't going to win it with that group. This one, I'm not saying they can't. I'm not saying they can win it or will win it, but I'm saying the door out there is open because you have that degree of talent.
And I think now they're playing not, they want to win a Big Ten title, but now they've got a taste of March. They want to go a little further. And one player you haven't talked about, I know we're out of time here, is the center, Tomislav Ivicic, the 7'1" center, who's got great footwork. And you hear him coming over, and yeah, he played against older guys, but he didn't understand skill level. I think as he gets going, we'll see there won't be many other 7-footers with that kind of skill set. Not comparing him to Donovan Clingan of UConn, but Clingan was one of those that he had a unique skill set that most teams didn't know how to deal with. They didn't have the personnel to practice against. And
Right.
or in fact, he's a different type of player. I think he could be that kind in terms of someone who steps down and hits threes like he's Nowitzki. And not that he's going to hit 40% of them, but he's just very smooth with it. And I think that's another piece of that when he and Yakachunas come in, Will Riley off the bench, Trey Gibbs, Lawhorn off the bench as scorers. To your point, there's some pieces there. If they come together, could be dangerous come March.
Yeah, I think the problem that Ivicic has is his brother already took the Big Z nickname.
Right.
So no, Big T, I don't think that works as well. I don't know.
Exactly. We'll call him Tommy Boy or something. We'll figure it out. Mike, we're out of time, unfortunately, my friend. Great to talk with you. Enjoy the hoops. I know you will. We can't wait to see you on BT and on Saturdays, and check out your stuff on Fox. And of course, obviously, we always read you on Sporting News. And we'll talk with you very soon, hopefully.
Thanks, Larry.
I appreciate it. Mike DeCourcy, once again, he's all those things. Basketball Hall of Fame writer, and we are honored that he spent some time with us here on the show. Stay with us. We've got to pay some bills, and we're back with more after this.